Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark, aka Derringer. Today is Sunday, October 1st, and you are listening to episode 125 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for Planetside 2 news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. So I'm sure most of you are aware, or most of you listened to last week's show, obviously. Today, October 1st, is my birthday, so I am celebrating that with the family today and doing a whole bunch of other work. So I'm actually recording this show pretty early in the morning on Sunday, October 1st, so I can spend the rest of the day doing whatever the hell I want to do, since it is my birthday after all. Granted, that means I think I'm probably going to end up mowing the lawn, and I think I'm going to end up closing the pool today, stuff that someone who, when it's your birthday, shouldn't have to do. But hopefully that means I can get in and play some Planetside 2 tonight, and like I said, do some stuff that I want to do. Also, if you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I'm freaking sick again. This time, though, I have the flu. I'm feeling better today than I was earlier in the week, but let me tell you, Thursday, I was knocked on my ass by the flu. And if you follow me on Reddit, follow me on Twitter, you know that I did get a flu shot this year. So thanks a lot, flu shot. You had one job and you failed that. So I know next month is flu shot time at work. So, I'll get it again and probably end up with the same thing next year. So, yeah, a little sick again today. Like I said, feeling better. So I can't say that I played a lot of Planetside 2 this week, but I did earlier in the week finish off the Bandit Araxium and therefore unlocked the Fortuna on my NC character. So now really the only goal I have left in Planetside 2 right now is to finish off BR 120 on my NC character. I am about halfway to BR 120 right now, halfway through the BR 119 to BR 120 slag, so not that much longer. One thing I did notice, I thought there was going to be a double XP weekend for members this weekend, and I don't seem to have seen it go live. I logged in Friday to play for a little while, and I wasn't getting the normal large experience boost. Maybe I just didn't notice it, or it wasn't jumping out at me. I didn't seem to be getting the double XP like I would have expected I would have gotten. So maybe the devs are holding off on it for another week or something, or maybe there isn't going to be one at the end of September. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it's going on and I'm just not aware of it because I haven't had a chance to log in since early on Friday. So yeah, that's kind of where we stand. I'm happy I got the Fortuna. I haven't really had a chance to use it, but that was certainly a goal I wanted to accomplish, and I have accomplished, so I'm extremely pleased with that. And then, like I said, last thing, just get to BR 120. I was once again hoping that I would see double XP so I could really maximize my playtime, but I haven't really seen that come through. But that's neither here nor there, because obviously we have a lot to talk about on this week's show. And I'm hoping that since it is my birthday, that you guys will give me a little bit of leeway this week when I kind of only do one real topic this week rather than diving into a whole bunch of different things. So I guess let's talk what's in store for this week's show. So I'm going to spend the whole show talking about the Critical Mass and Combined Arms Initiative update that dropped on September 26th and then was hotfixed shortly after that. And this is all PC side of the game. Sorry, PS4. You guys do not have this stuff yet. And again, like I said, since it is my birthday, I hope you'll just kind of cut me some slack with maybe a little bit shorter show than normal, but focused on a specific topic. So strap in as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. So, like I said, pretty much one, or I guess two total topics this week. But the biggest one, obviously, is the September 26th PC game update. And this one is the one that has brought us, like I said, the critical mass alert and also the combined arms initiative update. So, this is probably the biggest game update that Planetside 2 has had in a long time. I'm thinking maybe the most recent update that was as big as this one was the Air revamp update that we saw. And I'd hate to say that maybe going back further than that, the next biggest one was the OMFG, the Operation Make Faster Game update, because that feels like friggin' forever ago. So, but like I said, regardless, this is actually a very huge update, and hopefully some of this stuff will make its way over to the PlayStation 4 sooner rather than later. But as it stands right now, this is all PC stuff that we're talking about today. So, obviously, the biggest thing, or one of the two big things with this particular patch is the continent locking revamp. Obviously, I've been talking about this on PTS stuff the past couple shows, 3, 4, 5 shows in a row. But it is finally here. We do have the critical mass, which means when a faction hits a certain percentage of territory controlled and also a certain amount of cordium mined, that they're going to launch an alert. And the goal of that alert is the faction that launches the alert is trying to win it by retaining control of the most of the continent, while holding off pretty much the other two factions. And if the faction does indeed do that, they win a sizable amount of ISO 4, and they also receive a box of goodies, I guess is what it is. And I mean, people are talking about receiving boosts, people are talking about receiving camo, people are talking about receiving helmets, people are talking about receiving all kinds of stuff in game, and everybody is very excited for this. However, one thing that I have noticed is that on Emerald, specifically where I play, there seems to be at times 3 continents. Excuse me, like I said, still a little sick. 3 continents open, each one being pushed by a different faction, and the other 2 factions basically staying off of that continent, so that the faction that launched the alert can easily steamroll, ghost cap, do whatever they need on that continent, and actually win the alert for some free rewards. And I know that that is certainly not the intention of the critical mass update. So I do expect that we'll probably see something regarding that in the coming week or whatnot. Maybe limiting the amount of continents that are open, or perhaps limiting the number of alerts that can be kicked off at the same time. I do think, obviously, the easiest way to fix it would be, I mean, you can leave all the continents open, that's fine, but I would make it so that only one alert can be launched amongst all continents at one time, and that would certainly restrict this ghost capping crap that seems to be going on in game. And, I can't blame the players that are doing it so much. I mean, you're getting free stuff in game if you do this, so they're gaming the system, and that just seems to be what it is. So like I said, I can't really fault the players. I mean, it's kind of shitty that people are doing it, but that's certainly something that is clearly happening within the game itself right now because of the way things are currently built. So again, I'm hoping that we'll see some sort of fix to that, some sort of change to that within this next week. Because I can't imagine the devs wanting multiple continents unlocked, multiple alerts going off at the same time, and one faction winning, or a different faction winning all 3 of those alerts, just so that people can farm these rewards. So again, I have had a chance to play on a couple of these. I have not been part of the faction that has initiated and then won the alerts. On Friday night, I played in one as Vanu on Emerald, and we were we didn't start it. I think TR started it, but we ended up winning it. So I received a small amount of ISO 4 as a reward for doing it, because unfortunately I didn't spend the full 30 minutes on it. But it seemed to work well. I do want to experience one of those winning of the alert, so I can see the Bastion fleet carriers arrive and watch all the pretty lights come down as it obliterates all my opponents. But I just haven't gotten there yet. And I'm hoping once they fix that too many continents unlocked, too much ghost capping going on, that we get some really awesome fights on some of these continents. Unfortunately, I have not really experienced it as much as such as of late. But again, this critical mass stuff is clearly still a work in progress, and even though we play tested it on the PTS a whole bunch, it's going to have to come through some different iterations now that it's on live, because obviously not everybody went to the PTS and played it on the PTS. So again, I expect some changes, so I'm not going to complain about it too much at this particular point. Besides, there's plenty more to talk about in this particular game update. And the next one would be, let's talk about new stuff that people got. First off, the NSX Daimyo. I've seen my friend Mustarde playing the hell out of this thing. He killed me a couple times with it on Friday. It is the new NSX sniper rifle. The description of it says that it carries the headshot kill potential of a bolt-action sniper rifle, but also has the flexibility of a semi-auto sniper rifle with a 3-round magazine and a semi-auto fire mode. It also gives multiple different optics that you can use, including an infrared optic. I do not play Infiltrator much, so I have not purchased the Daimyo. I don't plan on purchasing the Daimyo anytime soon. There's certainly a ton of other NSX weapons that I could, or a ton of other sniper rifles that I could certainly play around with rather than the Daimyo itself. So I will leave it to those Infiltrator-specific players like Mustarde, who loves playing with new weapons like this, to give you the full details on stuff like that. So hopefully you guys can't hear my phone in the background. Facebook is friggin' blowing up on me with people wishing me happy birthday. So I'll just kind of try to work my way through it. Again, hopefully you guys can't hear it. Next up, Ambusher jump jets. This is something that the light assault class is receiving, and these are the jump jets that they showed during a dev live stream a few weeks back that propel you forward quickly, but with really limited vertical height. They are on a cooldown, but you can max out your aerial combatant rank to 5, which resets the cooldown on Ambusher jump jets upon a kill. I've seen quite a few people playing around with the Ambusher jump jets. I have not purchased them myself, because now that I've unlocked the Fortuna, I've stopped playing the light assault class again. I'm sure I'll get back to it eventually, and I will definitely be picking up Ambusher jump jets sometime in the future. But like I said, I've seen plenty of people using those to clear huge distances in order to bring the fight directly to people, and it's definitely confusing a whole bunch of players. I've seen multiple fights where a whole bunch of people with the jump jets come flying in and land right in the middle of a point that's being held by their opponents, and more often than not, the opponents are firing so wildly that they're killing friendlies in addition to the light assault using the Ambusher jump jet. So it definitely seems to have an interesting play style that people are using and enjoying currently. Like I said, haven't purchased them yet, but I will be purchasing them in the near future. Next up, something I did purchase immediately upon login was the Nano Repair Grenade. This came to our engineers, again, my favorite class in game. I've discussed it in the past, but now that it's official, it creates a field which repairs 50 health per second in an area for 12 seconds. It sticks to vehicles, it sticks to generators, it sticks to maxes, all kinds of things that this thing sticks to, and starts repairing health for 12 seconds. The one thing you do need to note when using this is that you can only have one active at any time. I have used this by throwing it on the back of a max as it's gone in to do a max crash on a point. It works wonderfully. I really like the Nano Repair Grenade, and if you're an engineer player like I am and haven't picked this up yet, this is one of the first things you should do upon logging in after patching your game for this particular game update. It is a nice little tool in the pocket for the engineer class at this point. Next, let's move on and actually talk about the Combined Arms initiative that next came out with this game update. And clearly this was just a way that the devs wanted to change the way that vehicles and infantry interact with each other. And their goal, maybe they haven't hit this yet, is to create a more enjoyable experience both on foot and in a vehicle, as well as smooth out some of the learning curves required for proper vehicle play. And to do this, they made a huge pass on the resistances and armor for vehicles and weapons. I'm not really going to go into this because we've talked about all these weapons resistances and things like that, so I don't think that I need to rehash all that information. But let's talk about some of the specific changes themselves. First off, the main battle tanks and lightning's armor. We used to get increased damage when being hit from the sides in both main battle tanks and lightnings. That has been changed, so now you're going to receive the same amount of damage from all sides, with the exception of the bottom of the vehicle or behind the vehicle. And the goal of the devs here is to make remaining mobile a lot less punishing, because now it's not going to penalize you as much when you're shot in the sides and taking extra damage. It's going to reduce the flanking aspect of the game a bit, and I'm not entirely excited about that. But, because obviously if you were in a tank battle, you'd constantly try to flank your opponent so that you were hitting them from the side, so that you'd be dealing extra damage to them. And clearly that's gone from the game now, obviously. But you can still do flanking to get behind your target, and obviously getting behind your target is still going to do double damage against the main battle tank and the lightning. So flanking is not completely gone from the game, but certainly some of the nuances of being a main battle tank or a lightning player are certainly gone with this Combined Arms update. And like I said before, the goal of the devs here is to get more players into vehicles as a result and remove some of that learning curve. Next, Liberator armor also got some changes. It now has a 50% armor boost when taking damage from below, and this is similar to the Valkyrie. And the goal here is to make it more so that the Liberator will take more damage over time rather than being able to be bursted down. Again, it's just some changes that were made to the Liberator itself to give it a little bit of an armor boost. Next, we got some vehicle handling improvements. A lot of that stuff was already on live, but they did make some additional adjustments to the Racer and Rival chassis for Lightning's Vanguards and Prowlers. Obviously, Mag Riders are included because they're a special type of animal altogether. And the goal was to reduce some of the slipperiness that comes from these chassis and reduce penalties relating to stopping power and brake use for the vehicles themselves. Also, another change that we saw is the rumble seat repairs. In the past, if there were multiple rumble seats, and this really only applies to the Valkyrie, you could out-repair any damage that was coming in. But now, new changes are that only one rumble seat will actually repair. So you can have 4 engineers in the Valkyrie, but the repairing is only going to work for one of the 4. In addition to that, they also added some changes to the repair rate for the Valkyrie. It's doubled to accommodate that particular change. And what this also allows them to do is increase the strength of the Valkyrie's weapons as well. But they do want you to know that it's still first and foremost a transport vehicle. But hopefully with more powerful weapons, it'll be a little more desirable as a overall platform altogether. Next, let's talk about the interactions between infantry and vehicle. The biggest change here is that infantry's long-range abilities against vehicles have been reduced. I mean, let's all be honest. We know or we've all experienced either by being or being hit by the Lancer battalion on the mountain, as one example, where a whole group of players with Lancers could absolutely decimate down vehicles without vehicles being able to do anything about it. So there's some big changes to long-range ability of anti-vehicle weaponry and players to make it so vehicles can survive longer, because this was really a frustrating experience for vehicle players because you really couldn't see where the threat was coming from and you couldn't respond to it until it's too late. Also, on the flip side of that coin, when you had a whole bunch of vehicles in a group, they were able to exert a little too much influence on certain areas, and specifically areas where vehicles should really feel disadvantaged in. And the big example here given by the devs is when they're up close to infantry occupied bases. So a lot of the weaponry to deal with vehicles got a bit of a buff so that they can take out vehicles in close range a lot easier than they could in the past. So again, long-range survivability for vehicles is up, short-range survivability for vehicles is down. And on the flip side of that, long-range ability for vehicles against infantry is up. So infantry is not going to be able to do as much, killing from long range as they could before, but they should be able to survive a bit up close. Next, we saw some changes to vehicle versus vehicle play as well. And the biggest thing here is the time to kill really has been extended. And a lot of that is because of the changes to the side armors themselves. Also, it is much more important to have your gunner seats occupied in your vehicles. So obviously, if you're pulling a main battle tank, you want to make sure that you have a top gunner in those, because you're going to get picked off by a lightning or an ESF a lot easier if you don't have your gunner. So remember, don't be driving off without a gunner, because the single-manned vehicles, I guess is the way to say it, are not going to be as good as if you had a second person in that vehicles. Now, Empire-specific fighters, these are your Sides, your Reavers, and Mosquitoes. They really didn't get too much change when they're fighting each other, obviously. So if you knew what was going on in the air, ESF versus ESF combat really hasn't changed. But instead, ESFs now have a lot more punch against Liberators and Galaxies. So now the goal for the devs was to make them have a more predatory role versus these vehicles, especially if those vehicles don't have a gunner or a particular escort. So if you're out there flying a Galaxy or a Liberator, try and team up with some ESFs so that they can provide some cover fire and some, to stop those enemy ESFs from shooting you down. Now let's talk about the infantry rocket launchers themselves, because a lot of them gained increased reload speeds, more ammunition, faster ammo resupplies, but also a reduction of damage dealt. They also all pretty much lost the ability to one-shot infantry targets, with the exception of the Decimator. The Decimator is still going to be able to one-shot kill infantry. Also, lock-on launcher ranges, they've reduced those, and I've certainly noticed that in-game itself, where I used to get a good lock-on an ESF. Now they've got to be a lot closer for me to get those lock-ons. Also, the speed to lock-on has changed as well. Again, I noticed that also. Also, the ground-to-ground and the ground-to-air lock-on launchers, as well as the Swarm and the Annihilator, all got a little bit more diversified to excel in some different areas, and maybe to add some more flavor to some of the loadout setups that you have. And a new change for all anti-air lock-on weaponry, including the Terran Republic's Striker, also the Ace Rocklets and the Locklets, are now using flak-type damage for splash, and flak-type damage for splash has no effect on infantry. So in the past, where you used to get hit with some of that splash damage as an infantry player, if these were shot at you, that's not going to affect you anymore. So clearly a big change to rocket launchers themselves. Next up, let's talk about C4, because throwing and triggering C4 is now designed to be a little bit more smooth and responsive. So basically, it kind of used to be janky in the past. I mean, let's be honest. If anybody's thrown C4, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But now that they added some additional control, they've also reduced the damage output against most vehicles. as well as the size of the inner blast radius itself. Now, 2 bricks of C4 on a main battle tank will still destroy it, but in the past, a single brick used to take about 80% of the tank's life. That's certainly not going to be the case anymore. And you're going to actually be required to place that C4 on the main battle tank for full effect to actually work. Again, just some little changes to C4 themselves so that you can't just miss with the C4 like you could in the past and still have it do full damage to a main battle tank. So just be aware of that. Next, the Archer got a lot of changes. Now, we know it's got some increased damage against most vehicles, but it did lose a little bit of the damage that it was doing against max units. Now, it is still a primarily max hunting weapon, but because it now does more damage against vehicles, it's better in a lot more situations. Also, projectiles that travel past 25 meters now explode in a small area of effect for some additional minor damage. A lot of people are complaining that the Archer is too powerful against vehicles at this point in time. I kind of agree with that as well. So I expect to see a little bit of a nerf to the Archer in the coming weeks or months or so. It's just too good at this point for 6 or 7 engineers all to get together and plink at armor coming in and take a lot of it down. So again, I expect a nerf to the Archer, so don't be surprised when it certainly happens. Next, Empire-specific anti-infantry secondary weapons. These are on the main battle tanks, harassers, sunderers, ants, flashes. And we're talking about the canister, the PPA, and the Marauder. They all now deal light damage to heavily armored vehicles, and that's really to allow more versatility. We knew this was coming. This was part of the Combined Arms Initiative. Again, all weapons now, except for the Cobalt, is going to deal some damage to armored vehicles. Next, the Common Pool anti-infantry secondary weapon. This is the Cobalt. It is the only weapon that does not damage heavily armored vehicles. Next, the Bulldog is going to be the biggest single shot splash damage one for anti-infantry. And the Fury has been moved more towards the anti-vehicle side while keeping some of its damage against infantry targets. So again, if you're just dealing with infantry, go with the Cobalt. If you're looking for some splash damage and area of effect against infantry, you're going to go with the Bulldog. If you need to do some damage against vehicles as well, you're going to go towards the Fury. Next, for the anti-vehicle secondary weapons, they've all been kind of moved into different categories based on range. Short range, that's your Mjolnir, your Vulcan, and your Aphelion. Your mid-ranges are your Enforcer and your Sarin. And the only long-range one is the Gatekeeper. And the Gatekeeper got a lot of changes in this particular update. Now, it used to be a constant damage over time weapon. It's now more of a burst weapon that is effective out to much longer ranges than the other Empire-specific weapons. Basically, when you press the trigger on this one now, it's going to fire 8 rockets at once and then reload. So again, big changes to the Gatekeepers itself. Next, moving off of Empire-specific back to Common Pool secondary weapons. These are, again, AV weapons. These are, again, available on your main battle tank, Harasser, Sunderer, Ant, and Flash. They also got range categorizing and adjustments as well. So mid-range, there are no close-range ones, but there are mid-range. This is your Basilisk and your Anti-Air Ranger, and your long ranges are now your Halberd and your Anti-Air Walker. Next, let's talk about Liberators, and I think this is probably the biggest complaint of all players within the game itself right now. So if you're a Liberator pilot, I feel your pain, so let's just go through it. First up, all Liberator nose guns are now able to swivel while aiming down sights. Not available on the PS4 yet, so you'll have to wait for that. Also, the damage output of pretty much all the Liberator weapons is reduced, and it's in favor of more sustained damage over time as opposed to burst damage output. And the intention, which a lot of people are upset with, is to allow the Liberator to participate in larger scaled fights while relying on crew members. The increased 50% belly armor, which I talked about earlier, is going to increase its survivability in gunship-like circumstances where they're hoping skillful pilots can take advantage of that against when fighting other ESFs. Now, the reality of this is that the Dalton is now a piece of garbage, and everybody's complaining about it. The Dalton was a unique weapon. You could one-shot an ESF with a Dalton, but the skill to do so was so excessive that very few people could do it, and those who did do it, it was usually the luckiest shot they've ever made while playing Planetside 2. And I love the fact that it was a high skill, low reward weapon, and there are very few people who could use it properly. And it's been nerfed so much now that it's that I'm very disappointed, and I know Liberator pilots are disappointed with it as well. And I know a lot of you are already uninstalling the game and not playing anymore. And I don't blame you. I don't know what else to say in this particular instance. Liberators feel like they are being beaten the hell on by ESFs now, and it used to kind of be an even battle, and it doesn't feel that way anymore after the Combined Arms Initiative. And I do feel for you Liberator guys, and I hope that we'll see some changes backwards. Now, I know it's kind of a downer talking about Liberators. I'm sorry, Liberator pilots. I'm not a Liberator flyer. I don't use them at all. I don't play with them at all, but I do certainly understand and feel your pain with the way the Liberator is now. But let's move back to main battle tanks and lightnings, and let's talk about their main cannons for a second, because obviously there are now 3 main weapon types. We've got the AP, the Heat, and the Hesh. AP maintains highest velocity and highest damage per shot. Heat will do less direct damage, but now reloads faster. So while its damage per shot is lower, it becomes more versatile and has a higher damage over time potential. The Hesh, that's the one that used to be the high explosive. It has its higher blast damage and received a direct damage increase comparable to the AP rounds. However, it lacks the velocity and reload speed. It is now a high risk, high reward, close range option. And again, the Hesh now is going to be doing damage against vehicles where it wasn't before. Also, with the Lightning itself, the C-75 has been changed over. It's now a tank-busting weapon. It does a lot of damage with its 6-round magazine, but really can only do that damage over short ranges because it has such a large cone of fire bloom to it as now that it didn't before. I mean, it certainly had a bloom and they kind of fired all over the place, but it's a lot worse than it was before. Again, your real goal now is to get up close with that C-75 Viper and unleash it into the rear of a tank to do a hell of a lot of damage. ESF weapons got not much changes as well. They are the same against other ESFs, but they are now a lot more. The nose guns themselves are a lot more useful against Liberators and Galaxies. Again, that goes back to Liberator pilots being kind of pissed off that they're getting eaten alive by ESFs. It's so true. Also, I've noticed ESFs, the LOL pods, air-to-ground missiles are doing a ton of damage to vehicles on the ground now as well. I mean, ESFs seem to be ending Sunderer fights constantly. They take out those Sunders far too fast. I would expect to see some sort of change to ESF weaponry in the future. There's obviously no ETA, no talk about it whatsoever. They just don't feel right in the game at this point. And again, specifically air-to-ground lull pods in this particular point, they just seem to be ending Sunderer fights too quickly within the game itself. Air-to-air lock-on missiles got some changes, though. They're now 2-round magazine. They're designed now to be more anti-Galaxy, anti-Liberator weapons, but they are a bit more effective than they used to be. Hornet missiles had some of their damage potential return to them, especially when dealing with main battle tanks and lightnings themselves. Next, let's talk about some vehicle abilities. And, as I go on this show, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a shorter show than normal, but it's going to be longer than the past few episodes just because there's so much stuff dropping in this particular patch. Like I said, vehicle abilities, the Vanguard Shield renamed the Forward Vanguard Shield. Now, in the past, it used to just add an additional health pool. Instead, now it's going to decrease the damage from the top and front by 67% and from the sides by 34% for a short amount of time rather than that health pool. The Ant's C4 barrier, instead of eating resources each time you receive damage, it's now going to provide a 20% damage resistance while the ability is active itself. Composite armor is now going to increase the overall health of a vehicle instead of increasing individual resistances. The health boost is going to be between 10 and 30% depending on what vehicle is equipping it. And in most cases, the health boost is the difference between death and being able to soak an additional tank round or rocket itself. I'm thinking a lot of vehicles are going to be using composite armor again if they weren't in the past. Flanker armor on lightnings and main battle tanks. If you had this before, it's been refunded. These were your regular armors. And it's now flanker armor. And what this does is it increases your resistance to C4. And this is going to completely ensure that 2 bricks no longer kill a main battle tank. Lightnings are still going to be destroyed with 2 bricks, but the damage of each brick is going to be significantly reduced. And that's to complement the maneuverability of the lightning itself. Next, infantry and max cert lines, as I talked about on a show or two ago. Both the Max's kinetic armor and the infantry nanoweave armor got some resistance, reduction to different resistance types by 20% based on your rank. And this was instead of increasing the amount of resistance with each rank. So rank 1, again, is going to reduce small arm damage by 20%. Rank 2 is going to add heavy machine gun damage. Rank 3 is going to add Gatling damage. Rank 4 is going to add soft point machine gun damage. And if you get all the way to rank 5, it's going to be small arms, heavy machine gun, Gatling, soft point, and the anti-materiel rifle, the Archer, by 20%. The Max's flak armor was removed and renamed Ordnance armor. It's going to be the same as the infantry's flak armor on live pretty much. Rank 1 is going to reduce common explosion damage by 50%. Rank 2 is going to add rocket damage or infantry rocket damage by 20%. Rank 3 is going to add tank mine and C4 damage by 50%. Rank 4 is going to add tank shell damage by 20%. And rank 5, if you have it all the way, it's going to reduce common explosion, tank mine, and C4 damage by 50%. Infantry rocket, tank shell, light anti-vehicle, and air-to-ground explosive damage by 20%. So if you're out there in your max with flak or ordnance armor now, getting that up to rank 5 is probably one of the most important things that you're going to need to do if you're out there fighting vehicles, and infantry rockets as well, and air-to-ground. I mean, the air-to-ground one's a big one for me. Next, flight suit. This is for, obviously, light assaults. Your fuel capacity per rank has increased. It used to be 10 at the low end, up to 20 at the max rank. It's now 30 at the low end, up to 40% at the max rank. It also reduces the cooldown time on ambusher jump jets very slightly. At max rank, it's only 1 second. And the costs at rank 3 and 4 were increased significantly. And the reason for this is that the previous benefits didn't really influence any play styles. So they felt that this was not a desirable suit slot option. And they're hoping that these changes make it more competitive and add some functions specifically to ambusher jump jets. Finally, with this game update, there were a whole bunch of miscellaneous changes and additions. You used to get, you didn't used to, but with, how you got air deterrence experience, you're also going to get vehicle damage experience now, and that's just damaging ground vehicles while playing as infantry. Tank cannon tracers are more visible, and you're going to get faction colored one now. Sphere spear phalanx turrets also got the faction-specific tracers as well. Azrael said there's a decent reduction to camera shake, area of effect, and intensity for a bunch of different explosion types. And then, I mean, we just go down the list, and there's a whole bunch of different things. A big one is they increase the visibility of smoke at lower settings. That's kind of a big one, because obviously in the past, people would potato out their settings so smoke didn't affect them as much. That certainly has changed. There's a whole bunch of other little changes that I don't really want to spend a lot of time going into with all these miscellaneous changes. And then there were a whole slew of bug fixes as well. Again, a large patch. This thing dropped right in the middle of a dev live stream that went on. I'm not going to talk about the live stream this week. I will probably talk about it next week because there's a whole bunch of Halloween stuff that they talked about in it. I actually may wait until they make the full announcement for it and make all that stuff come live. But the one thing I did want to talk about regarding the dev live stream is at the end of it, they offered a code up that is still active in game. The code is PS2 welcome back, all together, all one word. And what if you redeem that reward in game, it's going to unlock a platinum NSX Tonto, and it's also going to unlock a platinum helmet for you. Is it the reclaimed composite helmet, which looks awful, let me tell you. I hope there's just some bug with it, because when I unlocked it and put it on my NC character, I could see my character's nose, and I'm like, what the hell? There's a big hole in the middle of the helmet just so the nose sticks out. I'm hoping that's some sort of bug and not the way it looks, because I'll never wear it if that's really the case, because it kind of looks stupid. But either way, enter that code. It unlocks across all your accounts. It unlocks on your account across all your characters. So all three factions will gain that platinum Tonto and the platinum composite helmet. If you're like me, you'll never wear the helmet, but I will use the Tonto. Unfortunately, I unlocked the fully loaded bundle of the Tonto, so it doesn't really affect me much at all. But again, worth entering that code for free stuff within the game itself. And with that, let's move on to the hotfix that we got a few days later. All right, like I said, September 28th, we got a PC hotfix, like I said, just a couple days later, and it was just to fix some little issues that didn't make it into the critical mass that should have or whatnot, or also some changes to make things a little bit better. Miscellaneous stuff. Now the AVA, the Nomad, and the Zealot armor bundles should show a correct, full, non-discounted price within the game itself. Composite armor discount bundles shouldn't appear during login. The Daimyo now shows in the featured items section, stupid little things like that. Harasser had some changes. It got its C4 resistance reduced a bunch. It used to be minus 140. It's now minus 75. So it's obviously going to take damage from that C4 itself. And what the change does is the Harasser now goes to burning in one brick instead of death in one brick. And if you equip composite armor, it's going to keep a single brick from setting the Harasser to burning. So good news for Harasser drivers. Somebody can't just throw a single brick of C4 on you and blow you up thanks to this change. Next, the Archer resistances got some changes as well. Galaxies and Liberators got some resists, so they don't take as much damage from the Archer itself. And also the NSX weapon camo had some issues that got resolved also. Again, such a small PC hotfix is almost not worth taking the time to talk about it, but wanted to make sure I went over it. Again, I expect to see a bunch more changes this week based on players playing with this for multiple days. It could take 2 weeks, but either way. Again, there were obviously a whole bunch of comments and posts and people talking about stuff that came out of this. I just wanted to spend today's show and focus on the update itself and the quick hotfix that came out after. I'm going to talk about other stuff like that on next week's show. So with that, let's move on to housekeeping this week.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please. Housekeeping?
Not now.
Housekeeping?
Go away.
I coming anyway?
First up, I got an email from Matt9. He writes, Derringer, happy birthday. Thank you. I saw the Critical Mass went live today. I'm looking forward to playing some of it and seeing what you have been talking about on test for the last few weeks. Thanks for the podcast, Matt9. So yeah, Matt9, get in there and play it. And again, thank you for the birthday wishes. Hopefully you aren't stuck on a continent where it's just being ghost capped and farmed, and you actually play a good alert and do it start to finish, and your faction wins. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Next up, I got a voicemail from Tommy, and let's just listen to that. Thank you, Tommy, for the birthday wishes. I do always enjoy Tommy's voicemails. And finally, I got an email from SetFlow, and he writes, Hey, Mark, here is some current controversy on the PS2 Reddit at the moment. Interested to hear your thoughts on the next podcast about it. And then he gives me a link to one of the recent posts about some of the new implants that are coming down the line, specifically a Fortify implant. Like I said, I'm going to hold off talking about this one just for a little bit. I'll do it on next week's show. I'm going to talk about this particular item and some other stuff like that. I didn't want this show to go too long. But I agree with what your initial thoughts with this are. It does look like the most Zerg and Pocket NG Max combo friendly implant yet. Like I said, I'll spend more time on it on next week's show, so don't think I've forgotten about you. And then he ends with cheers and have a great birthday, SetFlow. Thank you for that email, SetFlow. I didn't want to ignore it, and I'll certainly talk about this on next week's show. But other than the smattering of different birthday wishes I'm receiving on Reddit, like I got one from Iridar and a couple other folks, thank you, everybody, for all of the birthday wishes. It's going to be, I won't tell you all how old I am because you'll just call me an old man, and we'll just leave it at that. So that's going to be it for this week's show. As always, how can you get in touch with me of the show? First up, visit my website, www.instantactionpodcast.com. Send me an email like Matt9 and SetFlow did, instantactionshow@gmail.com. Leave me a voicemail like Tommy did at 347-4VM4PS2 or 347-486-4772. As always, the show's Twitter account is @InstactPodcast. My personal Twitter is @TheDerringer. And as always, in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening, and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button. You know what would have been a great birthday gift as a little PS at the end of the show? If they had gotten that pistol for me in game. Maybe next year. Derringer out.